want to talk to you today about archaeological basketry and what kind of information we can get from that, and really how we can try to stretch the type of information we can get from it. So you saw this is a coiled basket from Egypt, 1350 BCE approximately. The bundle is made of grass, the winder is dome palm leaf, and I'll show you dome palm in a little while. This is how you find coiled basketry in Turkey, in Willeke. This is really old basketry, 7000 BCE, so about 9,000 years old. But really the structure of the fibers is gone. What you see are so-called phytoliths, sort of the hard parts of the plant parts that are still surviving. So it's partly impression, partly these traces of fibers. And as you see, what you get here is remains of the bundle material, but not of the winders, because that is completely degraded. So if we look at basketry archaeologically, then we really need to take a couple of things into account for our interpretation. Of course, we have objects, and we look at objects as a result of a process. So that's one level of analysis. But we also need to take into account the level of conservation. And that's not just looking at what you find, but also thinking about what you don't find. We saw the fish traps yesterday. Now, in some countries or in some circumstances, basketry will only survive if it's waterlogged and closed off of oxygen. So here in Britain and in the Netherlands, for instance, mostly what you find are fish traps, because they were underwater and they will survive and everything else is gone. So it's really important to think about what percentage of basketry that was once present do we actually see here. The archaeological context is really important. It would be very naive to think that what we find was actually just put there. Archaeology is not frozen history. There's all kinds of processes going on that change the situation in which we find those baskets. And of course the social context is what we really want to get to. Who were making these baskets, who were producing them, what kind of status did they have, how important was basketry, what was the meaning of basketry. So there's a whole slew of questions related to archaeological basketry. Some of them are easy to cover, some of them are really, really hard. Just going back to the Willeke basketry, if you look very carefully, you can find traces of two winders here. I don't know if you see them. We do have other information of how the baskets, what the baskets look like in impressions. So an impression, of course, gives you an impression of the winders, of the structure of the basketry. So between the two, we can figure out that this was made from a grass. We know that the bundle was grass. We don't know exactly which species. Of course, we can't say anything about the winders because we don't have any fibers left of that. And this is then how you find this basketry in context. This is a burial in a basket. It's a neonate, and it's buried under the floor of the house. So in this case, we can say, okay, the context, archaeological context, actually represents how this basket came into the ground. Most of the basketry we find in garbage dumps. This is an example from Egypt, along the Red Sea coast. And again, think about what you don't find. Basketry is something that you can use to stoke your oven, to use as kindling in a fire. So a large percentage of basketry never makes it to the dump. We do get some well-preserved basketry and netting though. And again, it's just a fraction of what once was there. Or we get this, in an area where no basketry survives, in this case in Egypt, because of termites. It's in the desert, so the preservation is good, but these bloody termites have eaten it all. But we do find this impression, and it's actually an impression of bed netting. And how did that end up as an impression in mud? Well, this is a good example of reuse of basketry. So this bed netting was used on the roof, and the roofs existed of palm trunks, and then you had palm leaves, and then you put a matting, and then you put a mud, and that is all reused old matting, so it could be anything. And you get a kind of sort of strengthened concrete or armored. So it's really strengthening the structure of the mud. Now this particular bed and the mat underneath and all the linen on top is from an undisturbed tomb, and the preservation in some of those tombs in Egypt is just amazing. This is the tomb of Ga, and these are some of his baskets that were buried with him.
So how old are they?
These are around 1350 BCE. Well, this is the oldest basket from Egypt, 5200 BCE, so it's Neolithic. What you see is that at that time, you think of prehistory as sort of a primitive period. Well, this is extremely fine basketry, beautifully decorated, very well made. So it really completely changes your concept of that culture. But because it's so rarely preserved, you rarely get a glimpse of that. At this site also linen was found, so it's the real first textile. And again, this was found in situ. It was found in a grain storage pit, which was also lined with basketry made of straw. The smaller basket is also made of a grass, but we don't know exactly what, because most of the epiderm has been damaged to an extent that you can't really tell. And then you have this sewn plaits technique that I just showed you, which can be either made as strips, sewn together, and then you get a mat, or as you saw in the video, it can be spirally sewn, and you get this whole structure of the matting. The one on the left side is made with 17 strands, the one on the right side is made with 9 strands. And you have to have particular numbers, especially if you do twill plaiting, otherwise those edges don't fit in each other. So this is then how it's pulled together. This basketry is also made in Nubia in the south of Egypt. The difference between Middle Egyptian basketry and South Egyptian basketry is that everything in Nubia is lavishly decorated. Everything is colorful. So as you see also in these sewn plaits baskets. The same type of matting is also used in the eastern desert of Egypt. The houses of the Ababda nomads are completely made of these mats. And this too is down palm. Weaving does occur in Egypt as well, but mostly from matting. Stake and strand basketry doesn't come in until the Roman period. But we do get a lot of twining, and twining is one of the oldest techniques that we get. In the matting we get weaving with 1 or with 2 strands mostly. And we also get a form of wailing within twined matting, as I'll show you. This is an indication that twining is a really old technique. It's a representation of a basket in stone. Actually much more work than making the basket itself. Pre-dynastic, so around 3500 BCE. And you see how well this is represented. The person who made this really knew what he was looking at, including the little ends that have been cut off. Well, this is where we were jumping all over the place. We're now in the 6th century AD. This is a donkey saddle. Made of the leaf sheath fiber of the date palm, and I'll give you a close-up so you can see it's twining in S and Z direction, and then we have this decorative rim of wailing over 2 under 1, and you also see how on the right side the whole cover has been worn away, so there you see actually the sort of the passive strands, the warp. Twining is also depicted in Egyptian tomb paintings. These baskets that they use for sewing are twined baskets, and some of those have survived. So it's twining, quite open twining with string. This is a grass. Now it's a halfa grass, And I have the Latin names for you if you are interested. It's a horrible picture, but it sort of brings across the technique. And then, as I said, when we get to the Roman period, we do get stake and strand basketry. Never willow, it's all brush, or all juncus. So there's this one, and this must have been a gorgeous basket. It looks sort of beaten up a little bit, but this is the center, and it sort of spirals out and is twined with a spiral row of twining. And I'll give you here a schematic drawing of another one of those baskets, where you see that the center is just simply crossed over, and then the base is mostly twined. And then we get new material being inserted for the sides. We have a row of wailing, just as any of you would do, to place everything in the transition from the base to the side. And then the sides is simply crossing over, quite spaciously done. And then we have the finishing off at the top edge, where the rim is. And this tradition, as I said, is not really, doesn't originate in Egypt. This is Mediterranean, and here we really have sort of the continuation to what we have in Western Europe. Weaving also is used extensively for matting. There's this beautiful depiction from the Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE, of a mat weaver. This is a little bit clearer, and you see this, his loom it's a very simple horizontal ground loom. He has 4 pegs that go in the ground with 2 side bars which hold the warp. And then he's weaving by sitting on top of the mat. Well, an article was published by someone who understands weaving, and she said, well, this artist really didn't know what he was doing when he depicted this, because a weaver can't sit on the mat. The whole tension of the warp threads would be disturbed, wouldn't work. It also makes no sense that on this side the stalks are depicted. They should be on the other side of the cross beam. The beam is used to sort of tighten the weave. So this is a nonsensical depiction. Well, and if you actually look at weavers nowadays, she is sitting on her mat, but she supports herself with a cross beam. And on the furthest side of this beam, I don't know the name for it, but to tighten the weave.
The heddle.
The heddle, thank you. It looks so heavy for a heddle, but it is a heddle. So, in front of the heddle, she has laid out her raw material. So it's actually very well represented what's going on. The fact that this is a woman is actually quite special, because these types of mats are usually made by men. She's the widow of a mat maker, so she just took up her husband's craft. Now, if you want to look at basketry and really see this as a result of a process, then it's very helpful to use the sort of organization of the production process. It's a French archaeologist, anthropologist who first came up with this, André Leroy-Gourmand, who said, well, these objects are not just objects, they're the result of a process. So he developed this idea of a chaîne opératoire, a chain of operations, and he described the production process that way. It's a way of organizing what has happened. Now, what you have to keep in mind is that the production process is really something that, if you observe a basket maker, or even if you are a basket maker, it's an organization that you have in your head, but you don't necessarily follow that order. The actual production activity is much more chaotic. There's much more happening. You might stop and make some more string, or so the stages that are described in the chaîne opératoire don't necessarily reflect reality. What discerning those different phases in the production process helps you with is first the timing of the actions, of the activities, an analysis of the movements that are done to come to the end product, You can also see that there's moments in which choices are made, how to continue. And those moments of choice are very telling of traditions of basket making and of the knowledge and tradition of particular individual basket makers. So that is where you find variations, and I call it micro variables. Often there are tiny, tiny differences in the way one basket maker does something and how another basket maker does something. But those tiny varieties are really what's very telling. So let's look at the production process. Well, I was very happy to hear Ian Edwards say yesterday that the preparation, the collecting and preparation of the raw materials often takes up most of the production process. And everybody who grows willow knows this, of course. Just the selection of your materials to make sure it's all the same size takes up a lot of time. So here we have a basket maker climbing a date palm tree. He's splitting the leaflets. He first has to take them off, splitting them. So a lot of time is invested in the preparation of his materials and the selection of his materials. So this, the date palm tree, the best leaves are the ones at the heart of the palm, the young leaves. You see these big sticks on which the dates hang, the so-called sword in Arabic. Those are used in basketry for the foundation of coiled basketry. And then at the base of the leaves, there's a very hard reddish brown fiber, the leaf sheath fiber of the date palm, and that's used extensively as well. So here we have a selection of those materials. The so-called sword is being shredded. If you drive through Egypt in harvest time, you'll see that they're all thrown on the street, so that cars drive over them. That saves a lot of work. And here you see how the bundle material is this reddish material, and the winders are dead palm leaf. So this is a dome palm, a very different type of palm tree. It's a fan palm. It's one of the few palms that actually fork out. This was the material of choice in pharaonic Egypt. Nowadays, this tree doesn't occur in Egypt that much. You find it in the south and you find it in Sudan. But now the material of choice is date palm. Dome palm is still used in Nubian basketry in the south of Egypt. And as I said, the Nubian basketry is always heavily decorated. Here you see a number of examples of older baskets. These are heirlooms in a village, a Nubian village. These baskets were food covers. So the top is really what is the most beautiful and the best decorated. Now, this is from a group of Nubians called the Fadidja Nubians. They really try to find the original material, so they will go out of their way to find the dome palm leaf. There's another group called the Kanzi, and they're much more flexible in their use of raw materials. So they will use washing line and cotton. What is essential is not the material, essential is the decoration and the patterning. Or they use chocolate wrappers. But again, the color is what's essential in this case. Now I want to go a little bit to the more intangible aspects of analyzing basketry. This is a mat maker. He's twining mats, and what he's making is two of those mats sewn together, which make a big bag to you can move earth or manure or things like that. One of the things I tried to do was time the actions, look very much at the attitudes, the gestures, the way people move, but also how long they take. And the working rhythm is really important. The work eye contact is really important. What kind of actions are sort of automatic? What kind of actions need real concentration? And what you find is that the points that need really concentration are the ones where you will find variation between different basketry traditions. Even though it might be coiled basketry, it might all look the same on the surface. If you really look at, for instance, the start of the basket, insertion of raw materials, that is where you see differences. So this is the twining technique used here. As you see, there's a huge variety of twining in Egypt. You can just play with it, you can space it out, you can make sieves, you can make very quick mats, you can make very strong mats. So I tried to sort of catch this working rhythm, which in the video you can see very clearly. If you speed up the video, you can see it even better. So fast forward is useful. And this, of course, is a very painful and painstaking procedure, very boring to do as well. What I was trying to do was sort of catch something that is not textual. I was trying to write about something that's tactile, that you can't bring across by writing. And it's really because there's these different knowledge types that are, and especially in basket making, the tactile is so important. So this was a kind of stopgap, trying to describe or trying to prove that there was a working rhythm. And in ancient Egyptian tomb paintings, actually, this illustrates it quite nice. This is the official Ming, depiction from his tomb, where he teaches the young prince to shoot his bow, and he corrects his posture. Whenever a teacher says to a student, let me show you, actually what he says is, let me make you feel. Let me try to convey how it should feel. And that is really what learning is about, of these types of techniques. So I became very interested in apprenticeship, in the way people learn. And basically what I think is brought across in apprenticeship is a lot of different things. There's dexterity, which I sort of see as learning the right motions. Then there's skill, which is learning the right motions in the right order for the proper purpose. So there's much more encompassed in skill. Endurance, just the fact that you can do a repetitive action over and over again, means that you have to have the muscle, not only the muscle memory, but just the muscle power to do it. But most important, if you really look into apprenticeship, is enculturation, becoming a human being. If you look worldwide at what is taught, why those apprenticeships are so long, yes, you have to learn muscle memory, you have to learn what I call body knowledge, but most of the apprenticeships have a very strong element of becoming human, become a proper member of a community of practice. And I was very happy with the title of this conference. This community aspect is so important because most of the learning happens in a community just by seeing, by being there, being in the middle of other people who do things, as we saw this morning. Just to show how strenuous this work can be, this is a bed maker who's weaving a bed, and with every thing that he weaves, here he just puts in the weft, he bends over the entire length of the bed and holds himself up. So if you can try. And there he goes, and makes the edge at the other side. Now, traditions are really embedded in those communities of practice. And it's both a formal or informal transfer of knowledge. So you have these very structured apprenticeships where someone has a 7-year period and learns step by step different types of baskets, for instance. But a lot of learning is completely informal. It's really sort of imbued with growing up. Essential in apprenticeship is that it's a large investment in time and effort to gain this skill, dexterity and endurance through observation, imitation and practice. So it's getting the knowledge, but also there's this element of enculturation and belonging. And there's also an element in a lot of apprenticeships of deserving your position. I've been through all that crap, so now it's your turn. Start preparing the material. You first can only make handles or whatever. That's part of becoming human. So how do you recognize this in archaeology? Well, that's of course the hard point. I'm doing a lot of ethnoarchaeology, which means working with present-day basket makers, working in present-day society, but with questions about archaeology in mind. It doesn't mean that I look at the present to understand the past. No, I look at the present to understand the present, because of course the archaeological remains are also something that is in the present. And it's really a couple of steps further to then say, okay, this is probably what was going on in the past. So we have to be a bit careful. But as I said, this idea of a community of practice, the knowledge that is being transferred as a tradition, really starting as a child, sitting with your mother and looking what she's doing, that really shows up in those tiny, tiny details. This is just an example of how the center of a coiled basket is made. And this is the variety of coiled basket centers in Egypt at present. And I'm sure I'm not complete, but this is what I saw in different places. So that's where you get variation, as I said, in the start of a basket, the rim, and how materials are inserted. For instance, the edge of this bed matting is very specific, and there is variation in that. Or the edge of matting, or, as I said, insertion of new raw materials. So learning is something that goes, it seems to go automatic, but it's very specific. It takes a very long time and an enormous amount of effort. Some of this is in an upcoming book called Archaeology and Apprenticeship, coming out of the University of Arizona Press in about 2 months. I also just wanted to announce that a book I did in 1999 is now freely available online, including the 1-hour video, which I just showed you a little bit. So if you go to eScholarship, there's where the whole book can be downloaded as PDF, and where you also can find the video. There's a tab, supplemental material, I'll show you. So if you go to the URL, you get here, and there's this tab, supporting material, and that's where you can find the video. And I must say, being here, I'm learning a lot. Thank you.